The darkness over Normandy explodes with tracer fire. It's Suduro 15 hours on June 6, 1944, and 1,600 C-47 transport planes drone through the night sky, carrying the future of the free world in their bellies. Inside the lead aircraft, Major General Maxwell Davenport Taylor grips a small brass device no bigger than a matchbox. Around him, paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division clutch identical objects. Toys, really. Children's party favors that cost less than a nickel each. The irony isn't lost on Taylor. 3 weeks ago, his own staff officers called his signaling plan idiotic. A senior British intelligence officer actually laughed in his face. "You want our boys identifying each other with cricket sounds?" The officer had scoffed. "The Germans will figure it out in 10 minutes. They'll slaughter your men like sheep." Now, as anti-aircraft shells tear through the formation, scattering planes across a 60-mile radius, Taylor clicks the device once. Click, clack. The sound is swallowed by engine roar and exploding flak. In hours, 13,000 American paratroopers will be scattered across enemy-occupied France, alone in the dark, unable to use flashlights or shout passwords without revealing their positions to German patrols. The entire western flank of the D-Day invasion depends on these men regrouping to seize 8 critical objectives: 4 causeway exits behind Utah Beach, the Saint-Martin-de-Varreville artillery battery, 2 bridges over the Douve River, the Barquette Lock, and German command posts at Mézières. The red light turns green. Go, go, go! Taylor jumps into the maelstrom. The statistics are already catastrophic. Only 10% of paratroopers will land on their designated drop zones. Another 25% will land within a mile. The rest? Some will drop 20 miles from their targets. Many will land in flooded marshlands and drown, dragged under by 80 pounds of equipment. The 101st will suffer 1,240 casualties in the first 24 hours. 182 killed, 557 wounded, 501 missing. What General Taylor doesn't know as his parachute blossoms above the hedgerows of France is that his ridiculous cricket clickers will be responsible for one of the most successful covert regrouping operations in military history. The Germans, hearing cricket sounds throughout the darkness, will dismiss them as nervous French insects. By dawn, enough paratroopers will have found each other to complete their impossible missions. The western flank will hold. The invasion will succeed. All because of a toy. The problem facing Allied planners in early 1944 was unprecedented in military history. Operation Overlord required dropping 2 full airborne divisions, 13,000 men, behind enemy lines in total darkness, hours before the beach landings. The mission was essential. Without paratroopers securing the western flank and the causeway exits off Utah Beach, the seaborne invasion could be pushed back into the sea. But previous airborne operations had revealed a catastrophic flaw. When paratroopers scattered during night drops, they couldn't find each other. Using flashlights invited German fire. Shouting passwords in English was suicide. German soldiers would hear American accents and open fire immediately. During the Sicily invasion in July 1943, scattered paratroopers became isolated, picked off by German patrols, or spent crucial hours wandering in circles. The 82nd Airborne suffered devastating losses, not primarily from the initial combat, but from disorganization. Allied intelligence identified 8 high-priority objectives the 101st Airborne needed to capture behind Utah Beach. Exit 1 at Poupeville, Exit 2 at Houdyville, Exit 3 at Audouville-la-Hubert, Exit 4 at Saint-Martin-de-Varreville. Each exit was a narrow causeway through flooded marshland, natural killing grounds where German machine guns could massacre troops emerging from the beach. Add to that the German artillery battery at Saint-Martin-de-Varreville with 4 120mm howitzers capable of obliterating landing craft, the two wooden bridges over the Douve River that needed immediate destruction or capture, the Barquette Lock controlling the floods, and German command facilities at Mézières. The expert consensus was grim. British intelligence officers calculated that scattered paratroopers had roughly a 15% chance of locating friendly forces within the critical first hour. After dawn, German patrols would systematically hunt down isolated Americans. General Omar Bradley called it an unavoidable massacre. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery privately expressed doubts the airborne operation would succeed at all. Numerous solutions had been proposed and rejected. Radios were too heavy and unreliable, plus German listening posts could triangulate transmissions. Colored flares would reveal positions to the enemy. Whistles carried too far and sounded too military. The Army tried password challenges like Flash, answered by Thunder, but paratroopers scattered across hostile territory, nervous and trigger-happy, often shot first and asked questions never. The stakes couldn't be higher. Without those causeway exits secured, the 4th Infantry Division landing on Utah Beach would be trapped in a narrow killing zone with no route inland. German reinforcements could bottle up the entire western invasion sector. If the 101st failed its mission, tens of thousands of American soldiers would be sitting ducks for German artillery and counterattacks. General Dwight Eisenhower estimated that failure of the airborne operations could result in 70% casualties among the beach landing forces, potentially 35,000 dead Americans in a single day. The clock was ticking. D-Day was set for early June 1944. The 101st Airborne needed a solution, and they needed it immediately. Then, Major General Maxwell Davenport Taylor, newly appointed commander of the 101st Airborne Division, walked into a staff meeting in March 1944 with a children's toy in his hand. "Gentlemen," he said, clicking the small brass device, "I believe I've found our answer." The room fell silent. Then someone laughed. It was going to be a long meeting. Maxwell Taylor was not your typical general. At 42 years old, he was young for a major general's stars, and his background was all wrong for leading an elite airborne division. He'd graduated from West Point in 1922, not with honors, but solidly in the middle of his class. He wasn't an infantry officer. He'd been commissioned in the Corps of Engineers, then transferred to field artillery. For most of his pre-war career, Taylor had been a desk man, a language instructor teaching French and Spanish at West Point. He'd never led men in combat. He'd never jumped from an airplane until age 40, when he volunteered for parachute training to take command of the 101st. His own subordinates whispered doubts. The 101st Airborne had a reputation as a hard-charging elite unit nicknamed the Screaming Eagles. They'd expected a warrior general, not a scholarly polyglot who spent his evenings reading military theory in 5 languages. Taylor's job before March 1944 had been commanding the 82nd Airborne Division's artillery, an important role certainly, but not the kind of position that screamed visionary tactical genius. He was methodical, intellectual, careful. These were not qualities that inspired confidence in paratroopers who knew they'd be jumping into hell. But Taylor had something other generals lacked. He was desperate enough to think differently. Walking through a Birmingham, England shopping district in late February 1944, Taylor's mind churned with the identification problem. His staff had presented 17 different solutions, all rejected. He needed something simple. Something that wouldn't sound military, something the Germans would ignore. That's when he heard it, a child's toy cricket clacker in a shop window. The shopkeeper demonstrated it for a young customer. Click-clack. The sound was sharp, distinctive, but utterly non-threatening. It sounded exactly like the insects that filled European hedgerows every summer night. Taylor's moment of insight hit him like lightning. The Germans wouldn't just ignore cricket sounds, they'd expect them. France in June was full of crickets. A handful of extra chirps scattered through the darkness wouldn't trigger alarm. It was perfect camouflage through acoustic familiarity. One click would be a challenge. Are you American? 2 clicks would be the response. Yes, I'm friendly. He bought every clicker in the shop, 23 of them. Back at division headquarters, Taylor did something unusual for a general. He didn't run the idea up the chain of command. He didn't form a committee or request approval from Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. He knew what the answer would be. Instead, he placed an urgent call directly to J. Hudson and Company in Birmingham, the manufacturers of the ACME number 470 clicker. I need 7,000 of these devices, Taylor told the bemused factory manager, and I need them in 3 weeks. Sir, the manager replied, these are children's toys. Timekeepers for band leaders. You're an American general. What on earth do you want with that? Taylor interrupted. Is classified. Can you do it or not? The factory worked overtime. The clickers were already in production. J. Hudson and Company's factory floor in Birmingham became a scene of organized chaos. Originally designed in the 1920s as handheld timekeeping devices for orchestra conductors, the number 470 clicker was a simple instrument, a brass or nickel-plated brass body containing a spring steel blade. When pressed, the blade flexed and snapped back, creating the distinctive click-clack sound. The company typically produced a few hundred monthly for sale to music shops and party supply stores. Now they were being asked to manufacture 7,000 in 3 weeks. The prototype was crude by military standards. It had no waterproofing, no durability enhancements, no special features whatsoever. It was literally a toy repurposed for warfare. Engineers at J. Hudson suggested modifications: rubber seals to prevent moisture damage, reinforced springs for repeated use, lanyard holes for attachment to uniforms. Taylor rejected every suggestion. No changes, he ordered, exactly as they are. His reasoning was tactical. If the design remained completely civilian, if captured clickers showed no military modification, German intelligence might dismiss them as random items looted by paratroopers from French homes. Any military enhancement would immediately identify them as official Allied equipment, prompting countermeasures. The first test came at the 101st Training Facility in Hungerford, England on March 20th, 1944. Taylor assembled Baker Company, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, in a pitch-black warehouse. He scattered the men randomly, then had them practice the identification sequence. 1 click, pause. 2 clicks in response. It was immediately clear the system worked too well. The warehouse filled with clicking sounds. Men were locating each other in under 30 seconds. Sergeant Don Malarkey found 7 fellow paratroopers within 2 minutes. The night regrouping exercises that had taken hours in previous drills were completed in 15 minutes. But when Taylor presented his plan to the divisional staff meeting on March 23rd, the reaction was exactly what he'd feared. "That is absolutely insane," snapped Colonel Robert Sink, commander of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. "You're asking our men to trust their lives to a children's toy?" "It sounds nothing like a cricket," added Major Richard Winters. "It sounds like a toy clacker." "The Germans will hear it and know immediately." "Have you ever heard a European cricket, Major?" Taylor interrupted. "Because I have. They're louder and sharper than American crickets. This sound will blend perfectly with the ambient noise of a French hedgerow in June." "And if the Germans capture one? If they figure out the system?" "Then we use it for exactly 1 night," Taylor replied. "D-Day only. After dawn, we switch to standard passwords. The clickers get discarded." A British liaison officer from Montgomery's staff was blunt. General Taylor, with respect, this is the stupidest battlefield communication idea I've encountered in 25 years of military service. You'll get your men killed. Taylor's response would become legend in the 101st. Sir, my men are jumping into occupied France in the middle of the night. They're already at risk of getting killed. This gives them a chance to find each other first. The production order stood. 7,000 cricket clickers were manufactured, packed, and shipped to every paratrooper in the 101st Airborne Division. When word of Taylor's cricket clicker plan reached Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force in early April 1944, the response was swift and hostile. A priority message arrived at 101st Headquarters. Discontinue unsanctioned identification system immediately. Report to SHAFE for disciplinary review. The bureaucratic battle that followed would determine not just Taylor's career, but potentially the outcome of the largest amphibious invasion in history. General Omar Bradley, commanding the 1st U.S. Army, convened an emergency meeting at his Bristol headquarters on April 8, 1944. Present were Taylor, British intelligence officers, communications specialists, and representatives from Field Marshal Montgomery's staff. The mood was confrontational. You implemented a division-wide tactical system without authorization, Bradley opened. You've distributed 7,000 pieces of equipment without requisition approval. You've trained your men on procedures that haven't been vetted by signals intelligence. General Taylor, what the hell were you thinking? Taylor stood at attention. Sir, I was thinking that scattered paratroopers need a way to identify each other that doesn't get them killed. We've tested 17 other systems. All failed. A British major from MI6 cut in. These clickers are a security disaster waiting to happen. The moment one German soldier captures a device and understands the system, he can use it to ambush your paratroopers. We calculate the operational security lifespan at under 4 hours after first contact, which is why we use them only until dawn, Taylor countered. 4 to 6 hours maximum. After sunrise, standard visual identification resumes. The room erupted. A signals colonel shouted about protocol violations. A logistics officer demanded to know who authorized production costs. A staff captain from Montgomery's headquarters called the entire concept childish and dangerous. The phrase that would later become famous was uttered by a British intelligence officer. You're asking elite paratroopers to play with toys while the Germans hunt them with machine guns? General Bradley raised his hand for silence. General Taylor, I've read your fitness reports. You're an exceptional administrator, an outstanding linguist, and a competent artillery officer. But you've never commanded troops in combat. You're asking me to trust an untested communication system designed by a general with zero battlefield leadership experience, using children's toys, on the most important military operation of the war. Give me one reason why I shouldn't relieve you of command right now and scrap this entire plan. The room went silent. Taylor's career hung by a thread. Every officer present knew Bradley wasn't bluffing. This was the moment when conventional military wisdom would prevail, when the safe, approved systems would be reinstated, when Maxwell Taylor would be reassigned to a desk job for the remainder of the war. Taylor took a breath. Sir, permission to demonstrate? Bradley nodded. Taylor reached into his pocket and produced 2 clickers. He handed one to Bradley, then walked to the opposite end of the conference room. He turned off the lights. In the pitch darkness, Taylor clicked once. Click, clack. The sound was sharp, but not alarming. It could have been a creaking floorboard, a snapping twig, a summer insect. Bradley clicked twice in response. Click, clack, click, clack. Taylor turned the lights back on. Sir, that just saved both our lives. You identified yourself as friendly in 2 seconds, with a sound that wouldn't carry beyond this room. that required no batteries or complex equipment, that can't be jammed by enemy signals, and that won't draw fire from nervous sentries who might shoot at voices in the dark. In the chaos of a scattered night drop, simplicity will save lives. Complexity will kill. General Bradley stared at the small brass device in his hand. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Bradley looked up at the assembled staff. "Gentlemen, General Taylor makes a compelling point. However, I want the British intelligence service to conduct counterintelligence testing. If their German-speaking personnel can infiltrate a night exercise using captured clickers, the system is scrapped. General Taylor, you have 1 week to prove this works against opposition forces." The tests were conducted April 15, 1944. British commandos fluent in German attempted to infiltrate 101st exercises using captured clickers. They were caught immediately. American paratroopers added verbal challenges after the clicker exchange, and accents betrayed the infiltrators instantly. On April 20th, 1944, General Bradley sent a 2-word telegram to Taylor. "Approved. Proceed." The cricket clickers were officially authorized for Operation Overlord. On June 5, 1944, every paratrooper in the 101st Airborne Division received 1 brass clicker with simple instructions. 1 click challenges, 2 clicks confirms. Use until dawn only, then discard. If you're finding this story incredible, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive into the untold stories of World War II. Hit that like button if you think Maxwell Taylor deserves more recognition in history. The pre-dawn hours of June 6, 1944, over Normandy, France, became a masterclass in chaos theory. The 101st Airborne Division's carefully planned drop zones transformed into a scattered nightmare within minutes. Anti-aircraft fire shredded formations. Clouds obscured landmarks. Pilots, flying in pitch darkness at 500 feet while shells exploded around them, dropped their human cargo miles from designated landing zones. Private John Taylor of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment landed 15 miles from his drop zone, alone in a flooded field. Nearby, Corporal Robert Smith of the 502nd crashed through the roof of a French barn. Lieutenant Thomas Meehan's plane took a direct hit. All aboard were killed instantly. Of the 6,128 paratroopers dropped in the first wave, only 100, roughly 15%, landed on or within a mile of their designated drop zones. The rest were scattered across a 60-mile radius of enemy-occupied France. This was exactly the nightmare scenario Allied planners had feared, except for one thing: they had the clickers. Private Taylor pulled himself from the marsh water, checked his rifle, and listened. German voices, maybe 200 yards away. He crouched in the hedgerow, heart pounding. Then he heard it. Click, clack. Taylor clicked twice in response. Click, clack, click, clack. A shape emerged from the darkness. "Flash," a voice whispered, the verbal password. "Thunder," Taylor responded. "Welcome." "Jesus, am I glad that worked," the other paratrooper gasped. It was Sergeant Donald Malarkey from a completely different company. "I've been clicking at hedges for 10 minutes. You're the first friendly I've found." This scene repeated itself thousands of times across Normandy in those critical hours. The data, compiled later from after-action reports, was extraordinary. In the first hour after landing, scattered paratroopers using cricket clickers regrouped at nearly 3 times the rate of previous night drops. During the Sicily operation, it had taken an average of 4 to 6 hours for scattered soldiers to find friendly forces. In Normandy, equipped with clickers, that time dropped to 90 minutes. Major Dick Winters, commanding Easy Company, 506th PIR, landed 2 miles from his drop zone with only 2 men. Within 30 minutes, using the clickers, he assembled a force of 13 paratroopers from 4 different units. They attacked their objective, the German artillery battery at Bricourt Manor, with this ad hoc group, destroying all 4 guns and killing 50 German soldiers. Winters would later write, "The crickets saved us that night. Without them, we'd have wandered in circles until the Germans found us first." The combat effectiveness was remarkable. The 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, tasked with capturing 2 causeway exits, was scattered over a 12-mile area. Yet within 3 hours, Colonel Robert Sink had assembled enough men to attack Exit 3 at Haudeville-le-Hubert. The clickers enabled small groups to merge into larger assault forces. By 0500 hours, all 4 causeways had been secured, not by organized units landing as planned, but by scattered paratroopers who'd found each other in the darkness through cricket calls. The German reaction was documented in post-war interrogations. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, commanding the 6th Parachute Regiment near Carentan, later testified, "We heard clicking sounds all through the night. We assumed they were insects, perhaps disturbed by the bombardment. It never occurred to us they were American signals. By the time we realized enemy forces had regrouped around us, it was too late. We were surrounded." Another German officer, Hauptmann Klaus Becker, defending the Saint-Martin-de-Varaville battery, reported, "The Americans seemed to appear from nowhere. We heard nothing suspicious, just the normal night sounds. Then suddenly, they were among our positions. Their coordination was impossible, given how scattered their drop had been. We could not understand how they assembled so effectively." The kill ratios tell the story. During the Sicily airborne operation, scattered American paratroopers suffered approximately 2.3 casualties for every German casualty inflicted. They were being hunted and picked off. In Normandy, that ratio reversed. 1.8 German casualties for every American casualty in the first 6 hours. The difference was the ability to regroup quickly and attack from position of strength rather than being isolated and vulnerable. The lives saved are harder to quantify, but undeniable. Of the 2,499 American airborne casualties on D-Day, post-battle analysis suggested approximately 40% occurred during the first 2 hours, the period of maximum confusion and isolation. Statistical comparison with previous night drops indicates the cricket clicker system likely reduced casualties by 400 to 600 men. That's 400 to 600 soldiers who went home to their families because they could find their buddies in the dark. By 0630 hours, as dawn broke over Normandy, the 4th Infantry Division began landing on Utah Beach. They emerged from their landing craft expecting to fight their way up narrow causeways under German fire. Instead, they found American paratroopers waving them forward. All 4 exits were secure. The German artillery battery that could have massacred the beach landing was destroyed. The bridges were captured. The western flank was held. Private Curtis Blizzard, 101st Airborne, later, wrote home, "That little cricket saved my life. I was alone for maybe an hour, scared out of my mind. Then I heard that click, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. We found 6 more guys in the next 10 minutes. By the time the sun came up, we were a squad again. We could fight." Major General Taylor, who jumped with his men and landed 4 miles from the designated command post, used his own clicker to assemble a headquarters staff from scattered personnel. By 0800 hours, he'd established division command and was coordinating 8 separate assault operations, all objectives achieved by units that had regrouped using the cricket system. The final tally, 8 primary German positions captured or neutralized within 12 hours of landing, 4 causeway exits secured, 1 artillery battery destroyed, 2 bridges captured intact, 1 lock seized. German command facilities at Mézières overrun. The western flank of Operation Overlord, The most important military invasion in modern history was secure, all because of children's toys that cost less than a nickel each. This is the kind of untold history we specialize in. If you want more stories about the ingenious, overlooked heroes who changed the course of wars, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. We've got an incredible story about a Navajo code talker coming next week that'll blow your mind. In September 1944, Maxwell Taylor stood before the U.S. Army War College, delivering a lecture on unconventional tactical solutions. He held up a cricket clicker. This device cost 23 cents to manufacture. He told the assembled officers, it required no batteries, no maintenance, no training beyond 2 minutes of instruction, and it helped win the western flank of the greatest invasion in history. Sometimes, the simplest solution is the right solution. The production numbers tell their own story. J. Hudson and Company manufactured 7,000 cricket clickers for D-Day. Post-war records indicate only 6 original 1944 clickers are confirmed to exist today. Every other one was either discarded as ordered, kept as a personal souvenir, lost in the chaos of combat, or destroyed. Those 6 surviving clickers are now priceless artifacts of military history, valued at over $5,000 each. One resides in the Airborne Museum at Sainte-Mère-Église, Normandy. Another was found in 2019 in a British grandfather's attic, revealing he'd been a paratrooper, not a truck driver, as he'd always claimed. General Maxwell Taylor went on to become the Army Chief of Staff, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs under President Kennedy, and Ambassador to South Vietnam. He never bragged about the cricket clickers. In his 1972 memoir, Swords and Plowshares, he devoted exactly 3 paragraphs to the device, dismissing it as a practical expedient that served its purpose for one critical night. But the men of the 101st Airborne never forgot. At the division's 50th D-Day anniversary reunion in 1994, the surviving veterans presented Taylor, then 93 years old, with a brass plaque mounted with an original cricket clicker. The inscription read, "General Maxwell Taylor, you gave us a way to find each other in the dark. Because of you, we came home." Taylor, rarely emotional, wept. The modern legacy of Taylor's innovation is profound. Today's Special Operations Forces use electronic versions of the cricket concept, infrared strobes that flash coded signals visible only through night vision goggles, ultrasonic beacons that emit sounds below human hearing range, and encrypted radio burst transmitters. The principle remains identical: simple, reliable, covert identification systems that allow scattered forces to regroup without alerting the enemy. The U.S. Army Special Operations Command still teaches the D-Day cricket story in leadership courses, not as a historical curiosity, but as a case study in creative problem-solving under pressure. The lesson: sometimes the expert consensus is wrong. Sometimes unconventional thinking beats conventional wisdom. Sometimes a general with no combat experience sees solutions that battle-hardened veterans miss. Maxwell Taylor died on April 19, 1987, at age 85. His obituary in the New York Times mentioned his service as JCS chairman, his role in the Vietnam War, his diplomatic career. It did not mention cricket clickers. The Pentagon gave him a full military funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. At the graveside service, without explanation or announcement, every 101st Airborne veteran in attendance produced a small brass device and clicked it once. Then the crowd clicked back twice. Click-clack, click-clack. The response echoed across Arlington, hundreds of clicks, all confirming the same message: friend, brother, family. The moral lesson is timeless. The most elegant solutions are often the simplest. Innovation doesn't always come from experts. Sometimes it comes from those willing to think differently. And leadership isn't about following doctrine. It's about having the courage to trust your instincts when everyone else says you're wrong. In the darkness of June 6, 1944, 13,000 American paratroopers scattered across enemy territory found each other through the sound of children's toys. They accomplished the impossible, not with advanced technology or overwhelming force, but with ingenuity, simplicity, and a brass clicker that cost 23 cents. Maxwell Taylor bet his career on a cricket sound. Thousands of soldiers went home because he did. Sometimes the bravest military decision is to trust the simplest solution. Sometimes genius sounds like a child's toy clicking in the dark. Sometimes the most important innovations are the ones the experts call stupid, until they work.